Hi, everyone. Welcome to our audience and our participants. Welcome to our panelists. We are here today to discuss key findings from our report, the Saudi Human Rights Commission, 20 years of whitewashing the kingdom's human rights records. Today, we are here united today because it marks the 20th anniversary of the Saudi Human Rights Commission. This commission was created in 2005, and it presents itself as an independent national human rights institution, one that claims to hold the government accountable, monitor detention, and ensure that international standards are respected. But our research, which was developed in partnership with ALQST for Human Rights and the European Saudi Organization for Human Rights, shows a very different reality. Far from protecting rights, the Saudi Human Rights Commission has actually become a tool for legitimizing violations and shielding the authorities from scrutiny. To discuss this commission here today, we have with us four stellar panelists. Dhainy, who is the director of the European Saudi Organization for Human Rights. We have Yahya Assiri, who is a Saudi human rights activist and founder of ALQST for Human Rights. We have Abdallah Aoudh, who is the senior director for countering authoritarianism at the Middle East Democracy Center. And we will be joined by Fawz Al-Otaibi, who is a Saudi women's rights defender and sister of MENA Al-Otaibi. I would like to give the floor now. So the discussion will be set in different rounds of questioning. And I would like to ask my first question, which will be about setting the scene. What is the Saudi Human Rights Commission? I would like to ask you first, Yahya, can you give us some background about the Saudi Human Rights Commission? How was it set up? What does it claim to be? And what is its official mandate? And how does it present itself?
Thank you very much, Falah, and for the great panelists and for the audience, for everyone. Actually, 20 years ago, there is a regulation published by the Council of Ministries to organize, they claim to organize the work for the human rights. For this regulation, they established the Saudi Human Rights Commission. And they started the work 20 years ago in 2005. And they claim in the establishment at that time, they claim they are independent and they are body to defend the human rights or to review the regulations inside the country and make sure it's much for within the human rights international law and also for other regulations. They said that, but also they added, and they are the body who have the authority to check or to monitor or to follow up the human rights situation in the country. So they have not said it is a body or it is an institution to follow up. They said it is the body and the relative or the relevant body to do that. That will show us they want to be the only body to do that. Also, one of the main issues with the Human Rights Commission, the head of the Human Rights Commission is nominated by the king, also the deputy, and also there is 80 members. They will be nominated by the king, and all the members for the organization will be nominated by the king. And we know if it's nominated by the king and established by regulation coming from the Council of the Ministries, that means there is no independency at all for the organization. I can't say everyone worked with the organization, they are bad people or trying to whitewash the government, but everyone in the organization is strongly involved in that, not because they are bad people or willing to do so, but because of the atmosphere and the regulations and also the system behind establishing this organization, and because basically anyone will not support the government and its mission, they will be kicked out from the organization while it is controlled completely by the authority.
Thank you so much, Yahya. And of course, the SHRC is meant to be independent. So my second question is to you, Abdallah. What does its structure, appointments of member, reporting activities, annual reports and such, tell us about its real independence? Can we say that the Saudi Human Rights Commission has fulfilled its role as a national human rights institution?
First of all, thank you so much for having me. Given the structure, given the context that my colleague Yahya just explained, given the background that your report and so many documentations internationally have proven so far, and given all the reports around that, and given the role that they have been playing in the international arena, including the UN, all of that indicates that the sole purpose of this commission is basically to enable abuse, is to cover up torture, to cover up human rights violations, and not to solve it, not to address it. And just to be fair, they may help minimally in things like people who are not able to call in a certain group of cases. And when I say a certain group of cases, there are not like political cases or high-profile cases. I have worked on cases where, for example, they help a little bit with some of the families, but the vast majority of cases, they have been they have actually played an active role in undermining any criticism of the government, undermining any real documentation of human rights violations. And in their annual reports, believe it or not, they actually publish annual reports. They publish periodical reports about cases that they have worked on or have been asked about. And all of that, in all of these reports, they've never admitted, a major violation by the government. They've never admitted any torture that every international organizations, including the UN, has proven and has indicated, has documented. So all of that context, and the fact that they have been appointed by the government, they are paid by the government, they're salaried by the government. It's basically part of the government apparatus. It is a governmental apparatus and part of the government, basically bureaucracy, and therefore there's no way this is going to scrutinize the government or provide any sort of oversight over government governance practices. So I want to just also end my remark here with one case that comes to my mind when it's a recent case. So I'm not going to cite, for example, Lujan al-Hadloul or others that have been visited. Even my father have been visited by this commission, and the commission at the end, they've never mentioned anything that they have heard from these individuals. They've never included any of that in the reports. They actually said the opposite, which tells you about their role at the end. But the recent case I was talking about is actually one that it's just less than a year ago. I was talking to a family of one of individual who has actually complained to the commission about abuse in prison. The commission tried to pretend like they care, and then a few weeks later, all what happened is that this guy was actually summoned by the prison warden. He was beaten, tortured, and he was told, if you ever talk to anybody else, you're going to face even worse. So this person decided not to approach the commission or any other person, because it looked like it's one of two scenarios. Either they are complicit in all of these abuses, or they are not willing to use their power to really change the situation. I'm just going to end here to allow my colleagues to complete the picture about the Human Rights Commission.
No, thank you so much, and thank you so much both for setting the scene about this commission. I just want to do maybe a quick remark for our audience that the reason why we're stressing on the fact that it is tied to the government, that it actually represents the government rather than being independent, is that it's because national human rights institutions are usually bound by this international legal standards that is called the Paris Principles, and it provides that human rights commissions, such as the Saudi Human Rights Commission, must be established on a constitutional or legislative text and have autonomy from the government. They have to have pluralism in the membership, security of tenure, independence, effectivity. And clearly, from what you have said, these requirements are not met by the Saudi Human Rights Commission. It's one of the reasons why we are stressing on this key point of independence. I'd like to go to round two of this discussion because in 2024, Saudi Arabia was reviewed by the Human Rights Council, so at the Universal Periodic Review. And it was also reviewed by the CEDAW committee, so the Committee on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, and the Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination. And in each of these reviews, the Saudi governmental delegation was headed by the Saudi Human Rights Commission, clearly showing that, an additional evidence that it is not independent, and it's actually just a mouthpiece of the government. So I turn to you, Dua. First of all, the rise in the death penalty was, the rise in the number of executions was a central issue in all of these reviews. Can you give us, first of all, an overview of the current execution crisis in Saudi Arabia, but also how has the Saudi Human Rights Commission responded to this in UN reviews? And what does what does the silence tell us about the role of the Human Rights Commission in such reviews?
Okay, thank you, Falah, for this event and for this discussion. Actually, very important discussion. First of all, I'm not the director of ESOHR. I'm the researcher in ESOHR. Just for your knowledge and for the audience. Just giving an overview about the execution and the death penalty in Saudi Arabia, we have to ensure that it's a crisis today, and it's one of the most alarming human rights issues globally, because while the majority of countries are moving toward restricting or abolishing the death penalty, Saudi Arabia insists on remaining one of the world's leading executioners. And just this year, 2025, we have documented it so far more than 270 executions. What makes this crisis even more severe is that even minors had been executed, and more among those minors are still at risk. This violation is for even the local laws in Saudi Arabia, 2018 Juvenile Law and 2020 Royal Decree, both of which supposedly ended executions for crimes committed by minors, and both who had been a part of the propaganda by the Human Rights Commission. The Human Rights Commission actually in public promises and talked about these laws as a reform, and they have been misleading. For example, in January 2020, the Saudi Human Rights Commission announced to hold a halt to executions for drug offenses. Its former president, Aoudh, stated that the aim was to give individuals who are facing nonviolent charges a second chance. But only 2 years later, in November 2022, Saudi Arabia resumed executions for drug-related offenses at an alarming pace. And now we have most of the executions of this year, I can say half of the executions of 2025 are for drug offenses related charges. And the Human Rights Commission continued to play a misleading role. Since in the UPR, where the Human Rights Commission was the part who was responsible in replying to the recommendations, and so they refused the recommendation of stopping the death penalty for drug-related charges. And in front of the Human Rights Commission, in the interventions, the Human Rights Commission always, in front of the Human Rights Council, the Human Rights Commission always repeated that Saudi Arabia have their own rules, and they refused the recommendations and the criticizing of the continuous executing of people for drug offenses. This shows how Human Rights Commission is playing a role of misleading, first of all, by the promises, and then whitewashing by trying to get excuses for continuing of the violations and for the executions. Also, similarly, in 2022, the Saudi Human Rights Commission was celebrating on Twitter the what it say, the stopping the executions of minors and the royal decree and of stopping the execution regarding minor. We documented it in the Human Rights Commission Twitter account, X account. They celebrate this royal decree, and they talked about stopping the execution of minor in their official websites, in their official interventions on the Human Rights Commission. Rather than that, they continue to threaten minors. Recently, one of the minors had been executed, Jalalabad, and still we have others. Also, while Saudi Arabia gets some communication with the special procedures, the Human Rights Commission take the lead for replying to the questions and to reply to the communication with misleading information, especially for example, the age of the minors are on death row, or the offenses that the Dhainy are facing. Also, we document one specific work of the Human Rights Commission. In 2022, the Special Rapporteur on Execution sent a set of detailed questions to Saudi Arabia. How many people are on death row? What are their conditions of detention? Do they have access to fair trials? What support is provided to families and children? What are the procedures before and after executions? Also, he asked about the body. Instead of providing clear answers, the Saudi Human Rights Commission, in a response that is published on the website of the OHCHR, they generic restatement Saudi laws and regulation, claiming they ensure fairness and rights. They avoid giving any statistics, any details, any acknowledgement of violations. They completely ignore the questions about minors, about the denial of legal counsel, or about families being informed only after the execution have taken place. And for now, the Saudi Human Rights Commission is still ignoring all the information that they received by several parties. For example, the UN mechanisms, as you mentioned, and even the states the European Union have some dialogue with the Saudi government, and they also asked about specific statistics and names, but they are misleaded by the Saudi Human Rights Commission, and instead of giving information and details, they just take pictures and publish it as a part of their propaganda.
Thank you so much, Doha, and for painting giving us a reality check about the situation in Saudi Arabia when it comes to the death penalty. Unfortunately, Fawz Al-Ataibi will not be able to be with us today due to personal circumstances. So I will speak briefly on her behalf, just to maybe give our audience a picture of what has happened during the CEDAW review, so the review of Saudi Arabia by the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. And as we know, the Saudi Human Rights Commission always tries to paint a positive picture of women's rights, and it has done so, especially during the CEDAW review. And on paper, Saudi Arabia has introduced some reforms, such as lifting the travel bans and easing certain restrictions under the male guardianship system, which the Human Rights Commission repeatedly says is progress. But our research and the testimonies, especially that of Fawz Al-Ataibi, shows a very different reality. Because the guardianship system, though formally it's a bit weakened, but it continues to shape the life of women in practice. It limits their freedom of movement, marriage, and participation in public life. And women who dare to kind of challenge these structures face severe repression. And it's the case of the sister of Fawz Al-Ataibi. Her sister is called MENA Rights. She was sentenced in 2024 by the Specialized Criminal Courts. She was sentenced to prison time, initially 11 years in prison, now reduced to 5 years. She was sentenced for online posts calling for the abolition of the male guardianship system, but also for sharing photos without abaya. Her case has drawn international condemnation, but the Saudi Human Rights Commission said nothing, even when it represented Saudi Arabia at the CEDAW committee. Also, Fawz Al-Ataibi tried to reach out to the Saudi Human Rights Commission on the number, by telephone, on the number that is available online, but her number was actually blocked by their service. And during the review, the CEDAW committee actually expressed, deep concern at this reality. And yet the Human Rights Commission continued to celebrate the reforms and remain silent on ongoing imprisonment and reprisals. And we can see that that's also the case of many other women's rights defenders, including Lujain Hesloul and many other who continue to face restrictions, surveillance, and arbitrary travel bans. Meanwhile, the Saudi Human Rights Commission does not address these issues publicly, nor with the victims themselves. And this is kind of a picture regarding the reality of women's rights in Saudi Arabia and how it was pictured and how it was shown by the Saudi Human Rights Commission during the CEDAW review. But I would like now to give the floor to Yahya, if possible, to tell us about the importance and why is the Saudi Human Rights Commission participation in these mechanisms problematic at the end of the day for accountability of Saudi Arabia's human rights violations?
Yeah, thank you, Falah. This is a very important question. Actually, it is problematic because basically the organization is not independent. And rather than participating in the international field, to talk about the violations and to represent the human rights field. It is actually, I can say it is a tool, a human rights diplomacy tool for the government. And it is represents the narrative for the authority within the human rights language and in the human rights field. And that will crowd the voices for the independent NGOs. And usually it must be the human rights organizations and the Human Rights Commission. They should represent the people, they should represent the reality and talk about the abuses. But when they are going in international events and around the world, represent the authorities' narrative, that could not just have make conflict of interest for them, but also can make it difficult for our voices to reach the decision makers around the world or the people around the world. So I'm for that. We are forced right now to do this webinar and to talk to people, to publish this report, to tell people this Human Rights Commission is not independent. And we are not just struggling, explaining to the people the struggle for the people and the abuses inside the country, but also explaining to the people what are the tools used by the authority to also cover up the violations. Rather than adding accountability for the authority, they are adding layers and more layers to protect the authority from the accountability. And this is them adding more difficulties for us, and also adding more difficulties for the people in the ground suffering from the violations, not helping us to passing their messages and their struggle to the world. This organization or this Human Rights Commission is acting for the government to cover up the violations and whitewash the picture for the authority.
Thank you so much, Yahya. And this actually ties perfectly with the next round of questioning to get more insight about how the Saudi Human Rights Commission acts on the domestic level. Now that we've spoken about the international level, we would like to dive on how it acts domestically within Saudi Arabia. So I turn to you, Abdallah. How does the Saudi Human Rights Commission interact with civil society and human rights defender within the country? And I know that you have a personal experience with them as well. And in practice, was the Saudi Human Rights Commission, what has the Saudi Human Rights Commission done or failed to do for prisoners and their families?
Yeah, it actually exactly responds to the same concerns that we have for them internationally. What they have done locally is basically two-parters. One is provide a mechanism for the government to say that they address such violations. Well, they don't. They just use it to cover up and to basically enable abuse and to basically attract all the complaints in order to translate it into something that helps government do these abuses without any sort of accountability. And on the other hand, they also do the things that everybody asks them to do in order to fill in this gap of what needed. For example, during the court sessions, in many of the individuals who appeared in front of the Specialized Criminal Court, they used the reports from the Human Rights Commission, and the judge depended on that. When they were asked about abuse, torture, violations, they depend on that. They use that for legal purposes locally, as they did internationally. And at the same time, whoever has complained, instead of the individual or the families thinking to go to the international organizations like ours and yours, or to the people who are outside, they present this like if it's a body that can address such issues, while we all know it doesn't. So I think that these are the purposes for which this was founded in the first place. And I think it's serving its purpose brilliantly. I mean, the wrong purposes, which is the purpose of covering up these issues and pretending to care and gathering all this information for the wrong reasons. And as the example that I presented in my first intervention, which is the person who complained, who actually went to them, or his family went to them seeking, address of this issue, they have been treated worse after the complaint because of all the reasons that I given, and because their real purpose is to pretend like they care, to allow mechanisms for the families to come to them, and then when they do, they just work in the best scenario for the government to enable abuse without providing any mechanisms for accountability or oversight. So that has been the pattern, that has been the systematic approach since day one. So it's not an exception. And I wanna also emphasize one important point, that this has not been like a deviation from what has the commission had done in the past. So it's not a deviation from what they had been doing at one point. It has been the pattern, it has been the systematic approach since day one. I was just talking to an international expert last week about the Human Rights Commission, who said he was there actually when it was founded, and he met the first president of the Human Rights Commission at that time, and he knew that person personally, and he said in the beginning everybody knew like a weak person was chosen so they can basically pass all the agenda that they want. I mean, the government passed all the agenda that they wanted with such a weak person, but as time goes, they actually made the practice of controlling this commission even more formally by just making it bluntly a government apparatus. And therefore, this just supports my argument here, which is this practice of covering up human rights violations, this practice of enabling abuse by the Human Rights Commission has not been just a recent development or a progress over time, or regress, basically, over time, but rather it has been the consistent approach, the systematic pathway that the Commission has taken since day one of its establishment. Therefore, in any way dependent on their report, on their assessment of the human rights violations or the human rights situation in Saudi Arabia, or like either locally by courts, by people, by individuals, by families, or internationally by international bodies, by the UN, by organizations, and thinking and taking their reports and assessments seriously is basically no different than taking the assessment of Ministry of Interior about its own records, or the assessment of the state security about the human rights violation of the kingdom, while the state security has been the forefront of doing and practicing and perpetrating all these violations.
Thank you so much, Abdallah. And I also wanted to bring up 2 or 3 cases that we've documented and we have included in our report regarding how the Commission also interacts with families of prisoners. And we've seen that, for instance, I've already spoken about the case of Fawz al-Utaibi, who tried to reach to the Commission, but they blocked her number. We also documented the case of the wife of now released Muhammad al-Qahtani. He was imprisoned for a very lengthy prison sentence, and basically the international diplomats were given false assurances about his case from the Saudi Human Rights Commission. And his wife put out a statement contradicting these false assurances that were put forth internationally. And in another case involving minors who are on death row, we've seen that in the response of the Saudi Human Rights Commission to the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention about these cases, the Commission was saying that these are unfounded allegations and that they have tried to document whether there was violations or allegations of torture in these cases, but they said that they found no violation. Although allegations of torture were documented by international civil society. So I just wanted to bring up these cases very quickly. And I turn to Dua, who I do not see, but I would like to make sure that she is here.
I am here.
Yes, okay. Perfect. So internationally, the Saudi Human Rights Commission, insists that Saudi Arabia complies with standards of on the death penalty. Looking forward, what would a truly independent national human rights institution need to do inside Saudi Arabia regarding the cases of death penalty?
Of course, there is several conditions that, depending on them, we can say that this is an independent institution that can help to improve human rights, as it should be a goal for it. There are principles, there are some standards just to be an independent, accountable, and effective institution. And there is some steps that if we see, we can say that this commission is coming forward to do the standards and at least try to help the victims of death penalty in Saudi Arabia. First of all, any institution would provide a transparent and independent data for people who are on death row. In Saudi Arabia, we don't have, and even international organizations have already contacted the commission, as they say they are independent, and ask for this data, and they did not get any feedback or information or data. Also, they should publish numbers that compare between the official data and numbers of people who have been executed or people on death row, and their own independent numbers, and that should be taken away or result of investigations and work. And so the transparency and getting the data is a first step to say that the institution is taking forward researches far away from the official data and official numbers that usually we know they are not enough and not transparent, and most of them are misleading and false. Secondly, also, when we have individual complaints, as you have mentioned, the Human Rights Commission should have their own investigation, should lead investigation, or at least call for an investigation by the authorities that are responsible of the people detained, not just ignore the information of the harshments and the ill treatment and the torture. We noticed that the Human Rights Commission visited some of the victims of torture, and instead of calling for investigations or leading an investigation, they ignore it. And they ask for evidences, for example, or they asked for information that the victim don't have and the family don't have. So actually, no real investigation, just ignoring the reality. Also, they should adopt a clear and public stance in favor of an official moratorium or execution, because this institution should reflect the human rights standards, the international human rights standards that the country should apply on itself. Even if it's not applied, the Human Rights Commission's role should be to call for this standards to be applied in the country, and the statements should not reflect the official calls only. No, it should reflect the standard that should be applied, not what is already applied. This is one of the main thing that we think if the Human Rights Commission adopt. Would reflect that it's not just a microphone for the government's statements, and so also they should show that they are independent, even because as you mentioned before, as Yahya mentioned, I think all the members are not elected. They are appointed by a royal decree, so they are not actually there. This shows that they are not independent. There should be we think that there should be a way to put the members in their roles to show this independency. National institution must be shielded from political intervenes and led by independent human rights experts. We can see that there are no experts in the institution itself, the Human Rights Commission. Also, and one of the most important thing, we should see a collaboration with the human rights civil society inside Saudi Arabia and outside, because we know the situation of the human rights society in Saudi Arabia. At least we can, or we should see visits by international organizations, for example, or responses to the calls of the international organizations, visits, or even responses to the emails and the messages and the calls that the organizations are sending. At least when you see collaboration with the independence organizations, international independent human rights organization, you can feel that the Human Rights Commission is playing a role far away from what the government wants and the whitewashing. And so I think this is the most points that if we see, we can say that Human Rights Commission is somehow trying to be independent and trying to play a role in the human rights reforms in Saudi Arabia, not just reflecting the government's situation and the government's statements. And so
thank you so much, Dua, for your intervention. And I turn to Yahya for a last question. How can international pressure be better used to expose the Saudi Human Rights Commission's role as a whitewashing tool? And what is your message to the Saudi Human Rights Commission and to the international bodies that still partner with it?
Yeah. I think first thing that we ask we demand the international bodies to do is to demand the independence and transparency for the Human Rights Commission. International actors, UN bodies, governments, NGOs, all of them, they should emphasize that any credible national human rights institution must meet the Paris principle for the independence. And the Human Rights Commission, they failed to fulfill with that. It is not with that standard. So the first thing that we demand them to pressure the authority and also the Human Rights Commission to make sure this body is independent. The second thing is to amplify the civil society voices. We know that the Saudi authority, they have not allowed any civil society institutions inside. They have not allowed anyone to express their opinion. And our friends inside the country, the human rights defenders, all of them, they have been arrested, tortured, and they have suffered a lot because they tried to expose the violations. And the only voices is coming from human rights organizations outside the country. So these voices must be amplified by these international actors around the world to amplify the voices for the human rights defenders. They are behind the bars, but they already have a lot of work already, and also for the human rights organizations outside the country. Also, for the engagement with the Human Rights Commission, it must be conditioned and it must be not completely open to have the engagement with them. The engagement from international bodies with the Human Rights Commission must be within the limitation and within the knowledge this Human Rights Commission is not present the civil society institutions, it's present the authority itself. And maybe the last thing to pressure them is the public exposure. So being clear everywhere, this Human Rights Commission is just like a shield for the authority to protect their reputation while they are doing the execution, the torture, the repression inside the country. This is maybe some elements that we want to put some pressure to have this Human Rights Commission to have it at least whether it's exposure to the world, otherwise have some independency and transparency. My message to the Human Rights Commission, I think there is some people involved in the work for the Human Rights Commission, and they claim that their aim is to protect the human rights, and they keep trying to do reform from inside, and this is completely not true. And we know, and I'm sure they know, that will not work. So my message to them, if you really aim to protect the human rights inside the country, so you need to stop acting on behalf of the authority. You need to stop to protect the authority from any criticism coming from outside the country. You need to act on behalf of the victim. And if you can't to do that, to advocate for yourself to be independent and to be transparent and to have authority. And if you can't, you don't need to do this work. Doing this work is completely a violation and adding a protection for the violation. The last message for the international bodies who partner with the Human Rights Commission, by engagement with this Human Rights Commission, acting, they are independent without any exposure, without any pressure on them and on the authority. That's also adding more layer for the protection for the violations. Anyone participate in any event with the Human Rights Commission, acting like they are human rights institute, independent human rights institute, anybody doing that, whether they are from the Human Rights Council, from the NGOs, from the governments, they are enhancing the body who enhancing the violations from the state. So having the picture for Human Rights Act coming like from foreign governments, contacting human rights organization, Human Rights Commission inside the country, talking about human rights, this is not Human Rights Act at all. This is violation, and this is adding a protection for the violation. And this is adding like, make a crowd for the real work for the human rights, make our work is more difficult, make the victims more suffer. I would like to make that very clear for everyone. We don't need to have like complaints in that. We need to be straightforward and clear about that. Anyone engage with them, first thing, anyone engaged with the Human Rights Commission, anyone with the organization, they are enhancing the violation. Anyone from the international bodies engaged with the Human Rights Commission, they are also participating in the violation against our people.
Thank you so much, Yahya, and our panelists, and thank you for ending on these words. I would like to see if some of our panelists want to have concluding remarks, any messages that you would like to say before we close. There's no pressure, of course, if there's nothing else you would like to add, but feel free to jump in if there's anything further that you would like to add to this.
Yeah, I just want to end with what we started with, which is to treat the Human Rights Commission as it is, a governmental body that works for the government, not to provide any oversight on it, and to understand that the Human Rights Commission is no different than the Ministry of Interior, for example, or the Royal Court or any other body, and therefore treated as such. It's appointed, it's dissolved, it's salaried, it's part of the government and its agenda, its discourse, and its propaganda, and therefore to treat it as an independent body providing oversight for any purposes is, an illusion and misleading conclusion that we should all avoid. So we should treat it as such, and therefore there's no purpose and there is no justification for any international body to use the Human Rights Commission or to rely on their basically documentation or reports to reach a conclusion about human rights violations in Saudi Arabia.
Thank you so much, Abdallah. Dua, I don't know if you want to add something further.
Thank you, Falah, for this and for the great report. The final just remark maybe, all our efforts is to protect and to help the victims and to help in improving the human rights situation in Saudi Arabia. Such institution and all the Saudi government trying to whitewash its image is actually making the work not just harder, but it make the stories of the victims harder to be improved and harder to be trusted by the international level. And this is why it's really a part of the government strategy. We see it, and this is why we are highlighting the Human Rights Commission work in this way, and the report and in this event. So thank you, Falah.
Thank you to everyone, and thank you to the panelists and the audience. Just to maybe wrap up very quickly, we can give also our audience just 4 recommendations that you might want to keep from this discussion. The first being that efforts should focus on supporting victims, families, and independent civil society organization, not on legitimizing a government-controlled body such as the Saudi Human Rights Commission. Second, our recommendation to international actors is that they should condition cooperation with the Commission on a demonstrated progress toward independence and accountability. Our third recommendation would be for Saudi Arabia to establish a genuinely independent national human rights institution that complies with the Paris Principles, with transparent appointments, financial autonomy, and the power to investigate violations. And finally, the key recommendation would be that until such reforms are made, the Saudi Human Rights Commission should not be treated as a credible interlocutor. And on these words, I think I will end. We can end this discussion. I would like to thank the panelists for their very insightful statements and answers to our questions. It was a very fruitful discussion, and we would be happy to receive any questions by email. You can reach out to us, or also take a look at our report, which is available online on MENA Rights Group's website. Thank you so much, and we can close the live stream now.